Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Episode 2. Here we are. Kayllen, we have officially gone number 2.
We have got. I hate you so much for that. Where is the angry Lego man for
angry
that?
Lego man. There he is. Yeah. Anytime we have a party foul, we just show the little angry turkey man with a pumpkin
to each other. Yeah. So one day when we actually have like a video for this podcast, we'll show you that. But you can use your imagination as a little Lego man with a turkey.
He could be our mascot. I could kind of like cut him out and put him somewhere.
I kind of love that. But yeah, we're on episode 2, which is crazy because I feel like in my mind I was like, okay, we're gonna do one episode, but then
it's gonna fizzle out.
What if it never happens again? What if it drops off the? And I like make this whole Instagram and I talk to everybody about how my life is changing because I'm a podcaster, and then we just never do another episode.
Yeah, that's really what we're here to talk about. Is how has your life changed? Since you became a podcaster.
The fame and the fortune.
I found that I have, you can't see me, I'm flipping my hair.
He's flipping his hair.
Okay. Well,
my headphones fell
oh
off.
no.
Okay, there we go.
Well, we should probably get to saying something with some semblance of understanding.
So guys, this is our second episode. We're so stoked. We're having so much fun. We've been having so much fun just like texting and calling each other about podcast ideas. We've been asking some of you guys,
the fans.
The fans and listeners, which is so sweet. And I went to a birthday party the like day that we posted the podcast, and I had like so many people asking me about it. Aww. And like encouraging us and just being so kind, and like family members reaching out and just like so much fun stuff. I had coworkers who listened to it, and it like such an outpour of support and kindness towards these two silly goofy pals who are just recording a dumb podcast.
Just us talking away.
Yeah, and so it's just so kind, and we're having so much fun, and like so this episode is just us hanging out, talking about our friendship, how we became friends.
An introduction of sorts.
Yes. And kind of like I wanted to talk about our first podcast episode which Nathan still is confused about.
I still don't know what it was.
I still haven't told him.
Yeah, I wonder if I remember.
Because I think you will once I really start talking about it. But we intentionally did not tell him about it at all.
I have thought about it though, and I still really cannot remember. So I'm excited. There's a lot of pressure now.
It's gonna be great. But we're just gonna talk about that a little bit, and then I think there's still a lot of nuance to our relationship, to why we wanted to start a podcast, and I think we had actually even some of the people who were talking to me about like the podcast like kind of fed into a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today. And so we're excited to get started on this episode 2.
We're going to talk about our name and everything. Anyways, I saw that you were setting me up for a very good segue there, and I didn't do it well. So
you didn't.
Now here we go. So now on to our sponsored segment. Today's episode of Talking on Eggshells is sponsored by Ancient Persian Brothels. Ancient Persian brothels are places where you can meet wonderful lifelong friends.
I didn't realize we were really going to go this way. That's
in
really
front
so
of
good.
Thousands of people, just
every day,
just sipping wine, lounging.
Feeding fake grapes to each other.
Feeding fake grapes and not like hiding them behind the hand so that it looks like you eat them.
Yeah.
What we're talking about is true and has happened. Yes. Oh my gosh, I forgot about that. Like actual tears. There were actual emotions. So basically what I'm trying to say is thank you, Ancient Persian Brothels, for bringing Kayllen and I together.
Yes. This is so freaking perfect.
Good segue, right?
It's such a perfect segue. And I feel like segues are going to be like such a big part of this podcast because I just love a segue.
I know. I literally,
segue.
Today, Kayllen, when I was thinking about the podcast, I was just literally thinking, like I got this image of like both of us riding segways. And I just was like, I don't know.
Screaming.
I hope because they have Segway tours in Philly. So like if I come visit, like we'll have to do a Segway tour.
That takes a lot of balance and core strength, I feel like.
I don't know. I've never been on one. I wouldn't know.
The
closest I've come to is the Segway game on Wii Fit Plus. That's it.
Screaming.
That's all. So
that is too much. But
either way.
Okay. Segways.
Segway.
So yeah. So Nathan and I, Buddy Old Pal and I, met at a theater that I'm sure so many of you who are listening know. We're just not saying names because like talking on Eggshells and we don't have to, you know. No,
not a
tea, no
sponsor.
shade. Just not a sponsor, but we just don't. It's like not a part of the thing. But we met at a large theater in Pennsylvania where we both went to school in separate years. What year did you graduate?
I was 20 something or other, 2016.
16? Okay. And I graduated in 2022. So we met in the cast of a show there.
Yes.
I was a student actor and he was a professional actor. And the brothel that we speak of is in one of the very first scene that the entire cast is in.
Yes.
We
there's just a lot of milling about of all the
it's like a big
ensemble
town
members.
scene.
Yeah.
And I was blocked to go over and sit with Nathan.
No. Actually, you weren't. You weren't.
I was.
No. You were blocked to sit on the couch, I think, with our other friend, our other co-prostitute. But here's the thing. The previous year, because we had done this show for 2 years, the previous year, I had just walked past that couch every day. I was blocked I just would leave. Okay? And there was like some people on the couch sometimes. I think a couple times I might have sat down, but the people were usually having a scene in there without me. Okay? And then you were on that couch. You know what I'm saying? You and our good friend Sarah were both on the couch.
You're right. It was just me and Sarah for a little bit, and then it was you.
And I started stopping by at the brothel. And
I don't know when and how it got decided that it was a brothel, but somehow, some way, we decided that me and Sarah and I, our characters were two prostitutes at this brothel that was owned by the princes who were in charge.
Yes.
Because
it was easy because I was a prince.
Yes,
so
you were a prince,
and
Seth Antes, our buddy old pal, who was like the head prince guy, his like house quarters for a different scene was upstairs.
Yes.
And so we did that.
Yep.
So it was just kind of perfect because it was all by each other. And Sarah like interacted with another prince after that scene, and they like kind of like flirted with each other and just meandered for like a little bit after that whole scene.
And I think also you got a compliment from the director.
I did.
And he said, "Kayllen, you're working that couch," which in hindsight could be said differently.
I'm screaming right now that I have forgotten this moment. I remember it. That we were in when you're in a conservatory school, and you're a wee little bab theater student who I had only done small community theater productions and I'm working in a professional theater. There are 50, 60 other cast members in the cast, and you're doing a show, one that's already been done.
Yeah.
So like a lot of things are already set. There's not really much that you can surprise a director with. And I'm just doing ensemble. And I remember that man. Everyone who's listening, if you're from where we're from, you know who we're talking about.
You know.
You know who you know. Talking on eggshells. I don't know why we would talk on eggshells about it, but whatever. We're just not mentioning names unless they're our buddy old pals.
Yeah.
And he said that because like what he would do is like get up from the front and give notes with a microphone in front of the entire cast over the loudspeakers of the entire theater. And I remember him saying that to me, and I think that the entire cast clapped.
Really?
I'm pretty positive. I remember everyone
that.
being like, "Yeah, Kayllen," and me being like, and we're just
I might have not even been there that day.
And we were having the most not rancid, but just kind of rancid time on that couch. Like,
and we got loud then. And like we continued. That's the problem is then that upped it. And then we were like working the couch, and it became very apparent that I, as a prince, was visiting the brothel.
Yeah.
With a woman on each arm feeding me grapes.
People did have to tell us to be quiet a couple times. And,
Did they?
I remember stage management telling us to. They said keep it quiet on the side stages.
That's right.
They didn't name us by name.
And we were there. Yeah. So.
But they said. But yeah. Anyway, so.
But that was it.
Yeah. We just became buddy old pals throughout the show, and Nathan was an alumni, and so he so kindly and so intentionally sought out like relationship with our class and
shared trauma.
And our trauma
Shared
and just
trauma.
Yeah. But like the main thing that we did at first was watch The Chosen together.
Yeah.
That was the first couple.
That's true.
Which is also a huge through line of our friendship that
it really is.
Now anytime that we're around each other, we usually try and wait to watch The Chosen until we can be around each other. But yeah, we just had a couple hangouts at your house with you and your wife and just sat around and would eat snacks and watch, just
Should I talk about our first fight?
Fight?
Yeah. Oh, this is my surprise then. Because this was one of those nights. This is where I found out that I knew you very well and that you didn't know yet that I knew you very well. And
I'm so intrigued.
I know. So something was happening and you were having some Kayllen reaction to it, which is usually not a quiet reaction. And I said, Kayllen, you're too much. And what I meant by too much was like, you're my kind of people. This is like too much. You know what I'm saying? Oh my
gosh, this is so good. Like, this is amazing.
So
good.
This is iconic. But it was like too much. And you did not talk to me for the rest of the night. We were sitting next to each other and you were just there. And I was just sitting there like, I know exactly what has happened. I called you too much. And I just can't wait to tell you that that's not what I meant. And then we did. And then I was able to say, like, hey, I'm realizing that you took that way because I feel like people have probably told you your whole life that you're too much, just like they told me.
Yeah.
And that was a big foundational moment because it was like, I mean, there's some C.S. Lewis quote about, like, friendship is born out of like just numerous me too, it's like you gotta find those similarities. So that just presented such a good option of just like, oh my gosh, I can see that you're like hurt by this thing that I said because I've been hurt by that thing.
Yeah.
And I knew that and that's been a through line of our friendship has just been
my gosh,
just literally everybody around us being like, you're just too much.
Yeah.
Which is why we're doing a podcast.
Exactly. Which is, it's actually really funny. Actually, the very beginning of our friendship, we were good pals, but we weren't like super, super close. You were actually more close with Beth, which is my best friend, my bestie for the resty.
Bestie.
Love you, Bethany Louise. Always got to do Bethany Louise.
She's on the road right now.
Actually, she's not. She's in Lancaster right now.
She's right
I'm
here.
actually going to go after we record this podcast. I'm going to have dinner with her and her mom.
Oh.
I know.
I'm so sad and happy at the same time.
Happy, sad. But you had a really, really deep relationship with Beth, like kind of from the beginning. There was just like an instant connection. And it wasn't probably until like April or so of 2021 that we even hung out by ourselves the first time, and we weren't supposed to hang out by ourselves. It was originally supposed to be Beth and one of her other friends.
Really?
But they didn't make it back in time. Yeah. Oh. And so we had planned like a hangout with all of us, and then it
just being
me and you and Abigail.
Yeah.
And Beth even was like, "This is supposed to happen on purpose. I know it is. Like, this is intentional by the Lord, and I know that you guys need one of."
Yeah. We had already. Sorry, I interrupted. We had already wept with Beth.
Yes.
Like, there had already been the moment with the couch that has now been destroyed because too many people's tears were on that couch.
R.I.P.
And like that, so we had already had that. So she's like, "Oh, you're up.
You need this." Yeah. Well, and it was this thing
which
where
is
I was
so
like,
endearing.
I think she knew. I know. And I think she knew, because she knew so much about my story at that point, and she knew about your story and her story. Like, she just knew how much overlapped, and she just knew that, like, we needed each other, and I think how similar we were, but we had just never, like, the opportunities that we hung out, we were always with other people, and it was always so much fun.
Yeah.
We have stories like Meep Meep, and the Muppet story.
Well, yeah,
that
and
will
I think
go on forever. I mean,
yeah.
Showing the like you guys doing the Samson dance for us.
Oh
Like
my
I have so many
gosh.
Snapchats of these like most random
I
things.
need them. Oh no.
Yeah. And so it was like we just never had hung out, and
Yeah.
it had just been the three of us. And I think that was such a shift in our relationship where I was finally able to actually like
Yeah.
talk to you and
Which
actually be able to open up without the fear of like there being other people around,
yeah.
or telling parts of my story that maybe other
Yeah.
people didn't know yet, and like not feeling like I could. And just so immediately it was so apparent how similar we were, and
Yeah.
how similar of a story we had, and just yeah.
And what's
Yeah.
so funny, if I could explain a little bit of my brain during that time, what's so funny is that, like, there are certain people, because, like, growing up, my best friend was a girl, and, like, I was always had friends that were very close that were of the female variety. I hate
Yeah.
that phrase. Why
Variety.
did I say that?
After the Barbie episode, no
Oh
less.
gosh, I know. But like, so I feel like what happened with you was like I just like put you in that place without even telling you. I was like, oh yeah, you're like one of these friends that's like wonderful and I can be close to, and I don't even, and I like just like we didn't like talk, but it almost felt like with Beth I needed to be intentional
Yeah.
because she is less talkative. And so with you, it was almost like I know that that's there, and then once it was,
Yeah.
then once the conversation happened, it was like, okay, there's the conversation. But it was so interesting because I think in my mind, I was always just like, yeah, that's Kayllen. Like I don't know, it was like,
Yeah.
it never felt, yeah. It's just, and that's just interesting meeting people, and like when you feel that way, because it happened with a lot of friendships. We're like right meeting people, I'm like, huh, that's my friend, you know, and like, and honestly, like. There's been times where it's been wrong and that's been unhealthy, but there have been many times where that's been right, where it's been like you click with someone and you're just like, wow, yeah, no, I click with that person.
Yeah.
You know, in different
No.
walks of life, in different seasons of life, in different locations, it's like there's just, and so now I feel like when I walk into friendships, that's I'm a lot more confident because I'm like, I have you, I have Beth, I have all these people that are very deep connections, that those connections were birthed out of me just being like, huh, I really appreciate this person. Let's reach out. And I think you reached out to us, to me and Abigail at some point as well, and was like, hey, let's sit down and like talk.
Yeah.
You know,
I think there was just so much like in that season of life, it was very, first of all, that season of life for all of us was just very, very, very difficult. There was a lot of stress, emotional stuff, relational things that were just really, really, really tough. And so I think what I was going to say is that there was just an element of like not everyone around us were able and willing, or even in a place where they could invest in us. And so there was very few, you know, we can count, and Beth and I call them our brothers, like our bubbies.
Yeah.
Who are like the handful of men, mostly, which is, we talk about this so often, which is crazy, but at that place, how often it's like young adult men who are not being creepy or they're like brothers that come alongside, like, especially like us conservatory girls who like protect us, care for us. And like, I think it's very interesting, but
which is interesting because it was like kind of the opposite of my experience.
yes.
Like, I guess I could say it was also, but like, I don't know. Interesting.
Yeah, but we had like a handful of these people, and some were women as well. I will not forget about the girls who came alongside me as well, people who were in my dressing room, and like that other alumni who were so kind and encouraging. But there was it was a you know, a very small group of people, and that small group of people bonded so quickly. And I feel like there were so many intentional things, and even like our tracks in the show, because we joke about the brothel, but the thing is that was the first thing of the day, like first big interaction of people for most of us, especially for like me. Sarah was in my dressing room, Matthew was not in your dressing room, but like Matthew was around with us as well.
Well, because I wouldn't have seen you otherwise, because you were on the other side of the stage.
Yes,
and I never saw the people in the dressing rooms on the other side.
Yeah. And so those first moments especially on days that were really, really difficult, or we were coming from classes and that had wrecked us emotionally, or having situations with people that were really, really difficult. Those were the moments where, while we were only together for like 3 or 4 minutes, we would sit there and just be with each other.
Yeah.
And like, I know you're on stage and it sounds crazy.
And you're in front of
people. We have
people.
like the fake, you know, like Persian posture of our hands up and soft and walking through water and all this kind of stuff. Yes. But at the same time, we're sitting there talking about our deepest hurts and our pain, and we're crying with each other, and we're holding each other's hands.
Were you there when we did, were you there when we literally did like the Meisner thing where we just did like one word?
Yes.
And we actually wept?
Yes.
Like, it was literally, I forget what the word is. I wish I remembered. And I think you were there. Matthew was there. There's a couple of us there. And I literally was just like, I remember like crying. And I remember like I had like panic attacks. There was a show I started with like panic attacks. And then what was also interesting was then it was after the brothel. We'd be backstage in that little area. And then we would all like talk. So it was almost like the brothel was like the setup. And then we'd be like, and it was only a couple minutes. But like, honestly, like, and that's something in my current season of life that I really do miss, is like having to have interactions with people that I love every day, you know?
Yeah.
Cause I don't now. I mean, I have people at work coworkers that I'm really close to, and I love that. But it was like, there was something like almost precious about the fact that it was like really quick, and you just, it was just like a little like check-in versus this where we're just having a long conversation, or just like other thing, you know, like we're talking outside of work, but then it's like at work I don't know, it was like
I think it set
kind
us up for also healthy interactions, because I think that if we were around each other all day long every day, I think it maybe wouldn't have been as healthy. I think it would have opened us up for opportunities of like even gossip and just bitterness and hurt and things like that.
But because so much out of our feelings,
they were such quick moments that I think it was this moment where like we could just kind of,
what's the heart of it?
You and I, who are verbal processors, it was just kind of this, I feel like crap, I hate my life, I need you to pray for me, I need to cry, I'm releasing tears now, okay, bye. Like, and there were, like I said, there were split seconds backstage where like I have to shout out Matthew Wilhelm. I don't even know if he listens to this podcast, but
he should.
That man,
he sent me a podcast about the Barbie movie, so
oh my gosh, obsessed.
He should have.
But that man, maybe, I think one of the most heartfelt and sweetest moments of my life maybe happened with him right after that brothel moment, and it was when I was going through such a terrible day.
It's just that sentence is really,
that brothel moment, the brothel scene, like, it sounds so bizarre, I know, but like I had maybe like genuinely one of the worst days of my life up at that point, like literally. And I was like, I had like 2 panic attacks before going on stage.
Fun.
I had one in my dressing room, one in someone else's dressing room in a bathroom, and then went out on stage and had to do this, a lot of just terrible talking on eggshells conflict. And I was sitting in that scene, just kind of like weeping in a way, but not. I was holding it a little bit more on stage, I think, but I was still definitely like, just like, I am so mad at all of this stuff and on this person and what's going on, and I can't handle this, and I'm so sad. And then this thing happened. We were on stage that made it worse, and I walked backstage, and I just like, Matthew just held me, and I wept. And he just apologized for the other person's actions that was happening, even though it's not his job to do that.
Yeah.
And just cared, and like was so kind and encouraging and like uplifting. And like, it was a 30-second moment. Yeah. I had to go do a quick change after that. Yep. Like, it was not like I had the time. It was just these super soft, tender, and quick moments that I think.
And I had the same moment with Matthew.
C.S. Lewis kind of moment, that it's like just these tiny little things over a period of a year that formed these relationships that I'm like, will never go away.
I know. And that says something about relationships in general, and I don't know what it really says about it, because it's like, well, that would transition us easily to the next segment, but I feel like so let's put a pin in that. So all that little formation of our friendship, and then we're talking about formating friendships. I don't know what I'm saying. But before we get into the next little segment, I need to ask you, what are you talking about?
Okay, so we had talked about this podcast. Oh my gosh, when did we start talking about that? Probably in like
January.
November of last year. No,
Well,
it had
that's
to
right,
have
it
been
was
a little
earlier.
earlier because
Yeah.
you came right after
Okay,
Christmas, right?
so I forget. No, before Christmas. In my
Oh, you
mind,
came-
Christmas and December, both simultaneously, lasted for 4 months. Because, and I'm not even joking. So Abigail and I were traveling in our bus. We had just moved from where we were in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
We were coming to, and like, I mean, listen, it was like we were literally being chased by winter. We were trying to get down to Florida.
Literally.
And so we were literally being chased by winter. There was a time where like, oh, it's so many breakdowns of just like, we're not going to beat the storm. And like, we have a little heater, but like in a crammed space and it runs out of, and like, it's just too much. And we can't really take the bus in like ice and snowy roads because it might flip and all of our belongings and dog and selves would die. So like, very stressed. But like, so that whole period of time, because it was in Virginia when I was in Virginia when it was actually Christmas.
Yeah.
But it was like,
right. Yeah.
but like I was with the Wilhelms putting their Christmas tree up.
Yeah.
And so I really
I think it was like those first few weeks of December.
Yeah.
Because we were doing Advent at that time because you
That's
did come
right, I
see
did
it.
come
So it
see the
had to have
Christmas
been,
show.
I think it was like, so I think you and I had started talking about the podcast probably then
I think that was it.
in like May or like June, July, like summertime, because I think I
Really?
got the idea of doing the podcast with you when we came to see you in New Hampshire.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
I think I like talked to Beth about it. I think we had just kind of like tapped on it. And then I
Yeah.
think over time it kind of just kept coming
grew.
up. But
Because by the
then-
time it was when I was there in Lancaster, that's when we settled on the name.
yes, it was. And so this story is kind of how we settled on the name and also what our first like episode kind of was. So at this time, Beth was living with a family and they had just had their little baby and Beth was the nanny of that baby.
Yep.
And so Beth was like still taking care of this child. Nathan, Abigail, and I were there at the house because we started the Twilight series in the wintertime. And I forced all my friends to
She
watch the
did.
Twilight series with me.
Good memories.
Because it's one of my favorite movie series ever, and book series.
Traumatized.
And so we're watching this, and we're like, the thing is that Beth is like doing so much. Beth was really doing a lot, and she was
Yes.
like taking care of this baby, putting the baby to bed, watching the movie, trying to hang out with us, all this kind of stuff.
It was quite a
So we're-
frantic energy.
so
I
we're
wish I
sitting
could
there-
show the video of like her rocking the baby and singing a song and like
Yeah,
it's,
literally.
like, so
and then
specific.
just like Jacob's in the background, just like Bella, where the hell you been, Loca? And I got you. So we're sitting there, we're talking, we've been talking about the podcast. We're like, what should we name this podcast? Like, what are we going to do on the podcast? What are we going to talk about on the podcast? Blah, 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 blah. And we're just sitting there and we're talking. And Beth is like, I have to go take this baby upstairs to go put her to bed. And I'm like, okay, but we don't want you to leave the conversation. So we're going to keep talking.
I do remember this.
Great. And so what we decided to do was Beth put her AirPods in and we called her on her phone and we talked to her on the phone. She couldn't talk to us back, but we were like,
Yes.
we want you to be able to hear everything that we're saying. And
While
so
she's
she was
putting the baby to
upstairs
sleep.
on the second floor and we were talking and we were joking that it was going to be our first podcast episode. It's kind of like a
Yes.
mock podcast episode.
And we did the
And it-
ASMR at the end, didn't we?
Yes,
we did.
that was the first time that we did the ASMR, and we figured out our name.
We did.
while
During
talking
that.
about this. It was me, you, and Abigail were talking about all these names. I wish I could remember what other names we had.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. Like, there were Enneagram 4 jokes. I think
Yeah,
there were like. We at one point I think it was just egg, and I don't know why.
I think it was. That's really funny.
I don't, and that's funny considering our logo and stuff now. Like,
Let me see if I can look up podcast names.
it's like we
Oh my-
went from just an egg to a concept to a mythos to a whatever it is.
to a logos.
Yeah,
Is that
I don't know.
it? I don't know. I actually
Yeah,
didn't really
logos.
hear
That would be it.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so we sat on the phone with Beth, and she's upstairs, and we're just saying all these dumb things, and we're like, God, I wish I could see what Beth's reaction is. Meanwhile, she's fighting for her life upstairs, trying to get this baby to go to sleep.
While she's also like trying to not die of laughter during the ASMR.
And it was just so good. And we're just like having the most fun time ever. And we're like, this is too good. We have to do this.
We have to.
And I talking on eggshells. So we're like talking. What are we doing? We're talking on we're walking on, like, I feel like we're gonna have to walk on eggshells.
Yeah.
I think that was like how it kind of came up. We're like, we're gonna be talking about all these deep things. We're gonna have to walk on eggshells around some things, because I can't talk about some of these things right on out, and we can't talk about some of these things right to everybody's faces.
Yeah.
And we're like, we're gonna have to walk on eggshells, and then we were like, talking on eggshells. And for a little bit, I feel like we were like, are we about to really make this talking on eggshells? Like, is that actually
just
gonna
a little
be what
pun.
our podcast is called?
Yep.
And then it just stuck. I was like, we can't choose anything else because it's just too good.
It just fit too perfectly. Yeah, and it fit for multiple reasons, because, like, on the one hand, and this is segueing us nicely, on the one hand, like, you and I feel like we have to talk on eggshells all the time. And I, like, just use that phrase now all the time.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it's such a specific feeling for people that are verbal processors. When someone who's a verbal processor doesn't have a space that they feel comfortable to speak in, it's such a specific feeling. Literally, this was most of my year last year, and, like, I literally got, like, severe jaw pain because I just was, like, withholding so much of what I wanted to say, and just all those layers of, like, if I tell this family member that thing, then they're going to respond this way, and that's, like, and I just can't, not having a safe place around you, you know, which also, little spoiler alert for one of our future episodes about dreams, we're going to talk about dreams, and Abigail was just telling me she learned this in another podcast, which I'll shout out when we do the dream episode, but she was saying apparently in dreams, if you see a lot of people you don't know in your dreams, there's not a lot of familiar faces, that also is a signifier that you don't feel safe around the people that you're around. And I realized, even to now, that I still very much, that happens to me, you know?
Yeah.
And it wasn't the case as when I was at the theater and when I was meeting, like, I had dreams with people in them that I knew, and, like, we would all be hanging out, and, like, you know, and so that was very telling. And that also, so that was talking on eggshells. And then I feel like, so there's that. So there's the fact that we already feel like we're talking on eggshells all the time. Yeah. But then there's also, and this is what I want to talk about, these are like the two things, the other side of talking on eggshells is the reality that, like, it is also okay sometimes to adjust what you say and have boundaries on what you say, because we're both oversharers too. And I feel like we've both gotten in a lot of trouble for oversharing.
My mouth has gotten me into so much trouble.
Yeah, and so, like, why are we doing a podcast? That's why the name is that, you know?
And that's honestly, and that's the thing is, like, so when some people were talking to me about the podcast, they were like, what are you going to talk about? And I would say, like, we're going to talk about these really big topics that a lot of people don't want to talk about for some reason.
Yeah.
And topics that you and I love so much. Yes. Like trauma, like family, like religion, and our
and religious trauma with your family, and all three in one.
Bada bing bada boom. And I don't know what that was. I feel like it was kind of the McDonald's theme song, but not. Like, I feel I was gonna try and do bada ba ba ba.
It was bada bing bang boom.
But it was bada bing ba boom. But, like, I was saying this, and the audible shocked responses that I got from people that we were gonna talk about these things. And I would always preface it with, like, we're not going to be, like, shady. We're not going to be gossipy. We're not, like, we're genuinely just trying to talk about these things that we love and we care about, and, like, you know, talk to each other as if we would talk normally. But so many people have this gut reaction of, like, those are things we don't talk about. Those are things that we don't talk about with everybody. Why would you want to share those things publicly with people? Yeah. And I think you and I we just so deeply love vulnerability and authenticity. Yeah. And that's so, I know that's, like, so Enneagram 4, and that's so the individualist and whatever. But besides that, true. Like, that's just what we crave in our relationships, you know? Like,
can't do small talk. Like,
my gosh,
I try.
No.
I actually, interesting, I lied to you. I can do small talk. I can do small talk with people that I'm very close to that I have had not small talk with. I've noticed this about myself. Like, I can talk about pointless things for hours with people that I have also talked about deep things with for hours. But if I haven't gotten to know someone's inner psyche, if I haven't gotten to know the depth of a person, then I don't know them. So, like, I can't even talk about movies because it's like, I don't even know how you're watching this. Like, I don't even know how you're interpreting,
and, like, how you're perceiving it and, like
what
you're,
and it makes me kind of scared to be like, I don't want to feed into a behavior that's not, like, okay, if that's a behavior that you have, and I don't know. It's like, and maybe that's just anxiety. Maybe that's me having control issues, probably. But, like,
I don't know.
I don't know.
I think I feel, oh my gosh, I'm only 23, but I feel like I'm just about to say something so old. But, like, as I'm getting older, I think, and as I'm getting older, as I'm working multiple jobs and doing so much stuff, I'm realizing that I love being around people, but there's still an energy that's being expended when you're talking about really deep and personal things.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, it feels like I'm going to have to expend energy whether I'm talking to someone about something stupid or something vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I would much rather expend the energy to talk about something vulnerable rather than I would stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, not even stupid, but just kind of like weightless.
Yeah. And it ebbs and flows. And it doesn't have to be the most
crazy, like,
you know,
deep, like, your deep parental trauma.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I don't want to talk about, like, the cycles of conversation that just kind of happen when you're in a workplace or when you're at a place. Like, what did you do this weekend?
Yeah.
What are you doing this weekend? What are you doing tonight? And those things are fine, and I love telling people so you can keep up to date in life and stuff like that. But it's just like,
I want to know how you feel about the doing.
And depth, and like how you're feeling, and like oh my gosh, you're going to hang out with your parents or your in-laws. Like, are you excited? What are you guys doing? How do you feel about doing that? Like,
because then that happens, and I like instantly when someone says like, oh, I'm hanging out with my family, I literally, my first question as soon as someone says that is like, so like, do you have a good relationship with your parents? Or like, is this strained? Like, is this? And it's just natural. And what I've found is, like, I know the people that I can ask that to. You know what I'm saying? I could ask that to you. I could ask that to Beth. I could ask that to Abigail. Honestly, the whole family that runs the farm that I work at, they're all like that. It's wonderful. Because they came from Mormonism, and now they're not. And that it was like, so they have this very tangible, we left a lifestyle and now have this lifestyle. And so that's, I think we'll talk about this a lot, but like, because they went through something very deep and very hard and very public, it was affected everybody in their lives. Like,
wow, yeah,
they're fine talking about a whole bunch of things because they know what the deepest parts are. And I think that's what I wanted to say in this vein of conversation is that, like, for people that are saying like, oh, I can't believe how vulnerable this is. It's like, this is decided on by Kayllen and I. Like, this is, and that's where I want to talk about the balance between boundaries and vulnerability, because it's like we're very vulnerable with each other, but also like when we're talking like this, we know, and we talked through some of the things that we're not going to talk about on the podcast. But in addition to that, I think there's just this inner knowing of like, there's certain things we just don't need to discuss.
There's certain lines that we don't cross. There are certain things that we don't talk about for a multitude of reasons.
But
like,
we can still talk about so much
nuance.
Yeah.
Yes. There's so much nuance, because the thing is, it's like, you're a married man, I'm a single woman.
Yeah.
So there are multiple things that we don't talk about because why would we talk about them? Not our business.
And I'm very glad you said that, because that's something that I was thinking about, because in this vein of people having, like, not knowing how to be vulnerable, I was just going through times in my life when that has been a repeated thing. And I was thinking about this of like, oh, I wonder if people are going to be like uncomfortable with Kayllen and I having a podcast.
I actually was thinking about that too, because I saw a podcast or a person. It's called Kingdom Sexuality. I don't know if you know. It's like an Instagram page, and it's also a podcast or whatever. I know that sounds bizarre, but there are 3 hosts, and there's 2 women and 1 man, and the man's not married to any of the other 2 women hosts, and people get really, really uncomfortable that they talk about healthy, like, biblical sexuality and like dynamics between husband and wife and things like that. And so many people are so triggered in the comments that he's not married to either of them. But the thing is, I'm sure they have really healthy boundaries set up. I'm sure there are conversations that they don't have unless their partners are there with them, and there are things that there are aspects they bring to the ministry and to the business that are just because they bring it, not because they're doing that with other people. Anyway, but go back to what you were saying about us.
And I was just going to say, it brought me back to stories that had happened multiple times. And I will say, specifically in the area of which you are living, Kaylin, was very common because, for those who don't know, there's a very hyper-religious background. It's a very legalistic religious background. And so what I realized, and I didn't realize this until my car broke down, okay? This is where we start. The car broke down. I needed rides home from work. And these two kind friends of mine who were females decided to give me a ride home back from work. And again, I have very strict boundaries on what I'm going to talk about, but I'm a talker and I talk to people. And so then what happened very quickly is they both developed a crush on me, like instantly. One of them then thought, and I hope that she's not listening to this, and if she did, like, no shame, I understand, like, I don't feel like, oh, that's like, but like, she thought we were dating for like a year. And I was shocked. And listen, I know when people think, when people like me, like I've always, since I was like a young person, it's always been like this kind of like, I'm very aware. I think it's because I don't like being manipulated. So it's like, I'm very conscious of like, you know, like you should have seen.
And power.
Yeah.
Vibes and
like, you should have seen how Abigail and I fell in love, because it's so like, how do you even like, it was like this ethereal thing that we both knew without even interacting, because it was just so like, because we were both like that. But like, what I'm trying to say is like, I did not lead this person on. I was very just like, I mean, basically we mainly talked about writing. She was a writer, so we talked about writing. We talked about books, and we talked about some life stuff because we were friends. And I talked with her about life stuff that we would also talk in our friend groups about life stuff. So there's no part of the conversation was actually even about deep stuff that was internal that hadn't told anybody else. And even in that, this girl thought that we were dating for a year and a half. And now, of course I felt, I didn't know that until I got engaged to my wife. And I found out that she had been like crying at church because I just announced that I was getting engaged. And not that I think she thought we were broken up at that point or something, but it was so later after. And maybe that's not even true. Like, I haven't talked to her directly about that, but like, I was just like, that's what hit me, was like, wow, people don't understand how to have vulnerability without, and that happened multiple times, not that situation, but I had people that would be like, I don't know, this feels like a romantic relationship. And I was like, okay, well, it's not. Like, I'm sorry, I don't feel that way. Like,
and I can speak on the other side of that, where there's this, when I find someone that I like, or I want to be around, or I'm attracted to, or in any sort of way, honestly. Like, even in friendships, but even in romantic, but especially in romantic, I can have a sense of like, on the flip side of that, of oversharing, over pursuing vulnerable conversations, over investing in vulnerable conversations that set up this, like, not false sense, but this very fast and quick, like, bond that can make me feel secure, or make me feel like whatever. And I think
it's almost like you try to buy it.
Yeah.
Like, you try to buy the stability. I was just thinking about this for myself today. No, I know. I was just thinking about this because of one of my other friends that also does this, and I do that. And I was just, so it's interesting we're saying that. I was literally like, I think I do that, where I try to like deepen it so that it stays. And that's why it's so interesting that like our friendships have stayed, because like, not because of that, not because we were like, let's make this a deep friendship. It was like, it just naturally happened without forcing it. We still took intentional spots. But anyways, I interrupted your point.
No, I think, I think there are both sides to it. Yes, have there been probably relationships and situations where people have overshared and talked about things that were inappropriate, or too vulnerable, or not correct timing, or all that kind of stuff that created inappropriate relationships or inappropriate dynamics and things like that. Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind that happens. I think it's because there's usually a lack of first of all, understanding of one's own emotions and understanding of one's own tendencies.
Oh, that's huge.
And that second one is so big, and you and I talk about it all the time. What is our innate response and our innate desires that we would do anything to go and get?
Yes.
And how does because there are things in our lives that are like that. And for the majority of us, it's to feel loved and secure.
Yep. In one way or another.
In one way or another, and what will we do to do that? And so for us, I think in a lot of scenarios, and especially in my past, it can either be oversharing, overreacting, over-involvement, like obsession in a sense.
Yeah.
And like this, infatuation of sorts that causes, dynamics that are unhealthy, and then people go, I didn't sign up for this.
Yeah.
I signed up for a cute little chat every once in a while, and like maybe I'll tell you some things, and I'll let you'll cry on my shoulder, and I'll let me cry on your shoulder, like whatever. But like nothing that's this crazy. And I think it's been a more recent thing in my life where it's acknowledging what am I wanting out of this relationship that I'm now putting into it because I want something. What are the tendencies that I'm leaning to? How is that manipulative or uncaring in some sort of way? And then how does this person actually desire to be loved and cared for? And then how does that change the way that I talk, change the way that I interact with them? Like,
Kayllen, I'm going to go back and listen to this and like just write those down, because that's literally such a good like framework for forming relationships, because like that's the truth. If you don't know your tendencies, whether it's a romantic relationship, a friendship, anything, a friendship that you don't want to become a romantic relationship passively, you have to know your tendencies.
So intentional,
Because listen, we both know people. We both know many people that like have fallen into terrible, terrible situations, and it's because they didn't care for their tendencies.
Yeah.
And they didn't put it over, and all the other things you said. It's like you need to be so self-aware. Because if you're not self-aware in a relationship, like. Yeah. You're just being selfish. It's like you're literally going to be just, and that's what I see a lot. And I've realized that all these people that have small talk relationships, it's like so often those people, it almost feels like their friendships are just for entertainment. And I've noticed this, and I'm not entertaining enough for them most of the time.
Yeah.
Which is saying something, because I think we're both very entertaining. But regardless,
I think we are.
But it's like I've noticed this where it's like okay, like dance for me, monkey boy. Is that a thing people say? Like
I don't know.
But like it is this thing where it's just like I feel like people need to be entertained versus helped versus supported.
And cared for.
Yeah. And that's where I think people don't understand it, because if your entire concept of friendship, and specifically friendship, I'd say not romantic relationship, let's say specifically in friendship, if people's entire perspective of friendship is that you don't get care and support, you just get entertainment and fun, and then their romantic relationships are the one where all the depth happens and all of the, then what happens is any time that there's a bleed over, you start to think, oh my gosh. And I've seen this happen to people where they're like, I think I'm having feelings for this person. And I ask them, and I'm like, are you?
Human interaction.
Yeah, it's like, are you? Because like, maybe you're not. Like maybe you are, and let's be cautious about that. But like, let's like talk through what it is that you're feeling. Are you attracted to this person because you can connect with them? Yeah, and either way, it's. I mean, we can talk about this later, but like, the whole idol of marriage in our culture. That's just like. So like again, like, and I mean Abigail and I literally, I can tell you this 100%, our marriage, we've been married for like almost 4 years now, which is crazy, but like would not have survived without support and community around us. And like now we're at a point where we don't have as much support and community around us, but we like know our tendencies in that situation, and so we're able to like adjust. But like, man, I'm telling you, it is healthy for your partner to have like somebody they can go to that isn't going to vilify you, but is going to be like, okay, let's talk about this. And same for me, like I needed people that I could talk to and be like, this is hard, what do I do with that? Like, because
wise counsel.
Because if I don't have that, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to literally just bring all that to Abigail.
Yeah, and for us, I think,
And
especially
it's too
for
much.
me, I was just actually just talking to like some other people about this today, which I thought it was really fun. But like, because then when conflict comes up, and if you've never, especially for us who are verbal processors, which means for me at least, I become way more emotionally reactive in verbal
Yeah.
processing sometimes, and so I can kind of like explode. Thank you, trauma. Fun times.
We should
Thank you,
just like have a
learned.
little. I wish I had like a sound effect that I could just like press every time we say like "Thank you, trauma." I was thinking
Thank
like
you, trauma.
chimes, like
Or just like a aww.
ah.
but talking about the ways that we react, because then we're not having those vulnerable and open conversations
Yes.
that lead us to a place where we can then communicate our desires, communicate our offenses and hurts, and
Yep.
like our needs. And like, yeah, I just think it leads to so many broken relationships because
Yep.
we're not either having healthy vulnerable communication with our partners or with our friends or with whoever we're investing in, and we also don't have healthy communication outside of that with
Yeah.
wisdom. And I think a lot of that is spiritual wisdom as well. Like you have to, like, I think
have to
it's really
discern.
difficult because you have to have other people who genuinely care and love
accountability.
the person that you are being around,
Yeah.
whether it be a friend, relative, or partner. Like one thing that I was going to say though is that I think I've also learned about myself. My number one love language is quality time. Like I've classified myself as a pet rock, because
I
honestly,
had a pet rock all growing up.
yeah, I love that.
His name was Steve.
Because a large part of like some of my like old, like, kind of maturing friendships, as I was becoming an adult, was like, we'd see each other every day because we lived in the same town and things like that, and we would talk about the deep and personal things, absolutely.
Yep.
But then sometimes we would just sit there and they would play their Switch on the TV and I would just watch them play video games.
Yes.
And that would be
Literally,
our hangouts,
Kaylin, I'm doing that like tomorrow. Not tomorrow, Sunday. Me and my friend from work and his cousins are in town, and we're just gonna like play old Wii games.
That's too good.
Like, I'm
But
very excited.
it's dumb things like that, or like going to sit at a coffee shop and like you don't have to talk to each other. Like you can every
Yeah.
once in a while, but like going and chilling out, and I'll watch a video of Critical Role, and you can watch whatever, or
Yep.
do whatever you need to do, or
And you
whatever.
know that for you and me, if that's huge, if we feel comfortable in silence.
Yes.
Because there's some people, Matthew Wilhelm, that are so comfortable in silence that it's infuriating. Because
Yeah.
it's like, how are
we having that conversation? Yeah.
and I start to run my mind and think,
Well,
they
I was
hate
really
me,
going to
they-
say the reason silence is so scary is because my brain then starts to go,
Yes.
what is this other person thinking? And
Yeah.
I have the tendency to make up what the other person is thinking, usually skewed negatively towards myself. And then, but so it's like, which is changing and flipping and all that kind of fun stuff because
good.
of healthy relationships. Because of people who have communicated verbally with me saying,
Yes.
this is what I'm thinking right now, or this is what
Yeah.
I'm feeling towards you right now, or this is what
Yeah.
But for some people, because of the relationship, I don't have to do that. But
Yes.
what I've learned and I've seen is that I think that I am capable of having less quality time, less one-on-one in-person time with people when I know that like good, vulnerable, authentic conversation will
Yep.
happen
Yeah.
and does happen.
I agree.
Because you and I
Yeah.
don't spend time with each other. We're
We're
all the way across
all the
from
way
the
across
country.
Yep.
And our friendship has never been stronger than even
Yeah.
when you were here.
Yeah.
Like, and
So
there,
interesting.
same thing with Beth. Like, she was
Oh, I
gone
could
and doing all this
cry.
stuff. And I know. And like, our relationship is just as strong, if not stronger,
And-
because
yeah.
of the intentional time and the intentional things that we've had to do.
Well, and I was just I was talking to Beth last night while I was cleaning a
yeah.
bank, and she was talking about that in regards to your friendship. So let me just butt into your friendship. Like, look at this. I know this is Beth's
I'll
closest
cry.
entrance, but she was saying how like y'all like talk less than you used to talk when you were
Yeah.
like away from each other, and it's like, wow, look at how healthy that is, because like it used to be this scary thing, and I feel the same way where it's like I've had so many relationships fall through, romantic, friendship, otherwise, like I have had so many of those relationships fall through, and so it's taken me a long time to be like, and now I think what the one that I've noticed the most right now is Michael Hudson, my brother,
Brother.
he
One
had
of my
baby,
bubs.
he had a little baby,
Noah.
whose birthday was my birthday, and that was just a gift from the Lord, but he can't talk to me as much right now, like
Yeah.
he can't, and we've tried to, like, talk a few times, and it just hasn't worked out. And like 2 years ago, man, I would have been so insecure about that. But now it's like there is such a such a backlog of emotional moments that I've gone through with Michael. Times where I've held him weeping, where he's held me weeping, where like we know that like, and again, just for people who are not as comfortable with just weeping around people, like I'm not saying that's how you develop friendship either. Like I think, and I'll talk about that other side in a little bit, is just like the also like we were saying about not equating emotional intensity with depth. That's another thing.
Yeah.
But like he's just been steady for like 7 years in my life. Steadiest friendship I'd say in my entire life. And so now it's like he has a newborn. And that means there's a little bit less. And that's fine. And like it took training. Like literally, it took training for my brain to get to a place of being able to process that. Because when you have relationships that fall through, you have a lot of relational trauma. Yeah. It's just the reality to you. And so it's not like you're acting crazy. It's like, no, that's the reality. Is that like you are going to be afraid of the other person leaving until it's been... I knew one person, one of Abigail's friends' moms, that like she had a suitcase packed for 6 years into their marriage. Like 6 years. And like it wasn't because they weren't in love. It wasn't because she was like holding... like it was because she had severe trauma from her parents and her parents' relationship. Yeah. And so she was just like had to be ready. And it's like, that's the type of stuff, like literally the unpacking of the suitcase, you know, it's like, you have to unpack things.
And just being self-aware and then being intentional in those relationships. Because I think that's the same thing with me. Is like, even friends that live in the same town as me, there are many people who I won't see but once a month. I'll maybe see them in passing and give them a hug on the neck and tell them that I love and I miss them. Maybe I'll send a couple voice memos here and there. But to like genuinely sit down and have human interaction with this person once a month, maybe. Maybe less. And I think what month is it? August? 8 months ago was frightened, I love that petrified.
You had to say how many months?
I know.
That's how you know it's fresh.
I was so frightened and scared.
I remember,
of the lack of that. I mean, that's one of the things I told you guys
that's what
about,
you were, and you know what you did? You went through an intense time of that. You went through a time where you were like, wow, all my close relationships, no one's close to me anymore. Like, no one's physically close to me anymore. Yeah. And look at you now. You went through a gauntlet. You know,
I did. And the Lord's so good to show me those relationships that are like the ones that are the big ones. Yeah. Because I think that's the thing for me, is that I have such a deep desire to be friends with a lot of people. It's this kind of like scarcity complex. It's like I need to have as much as I possibly can to come around me and support me. I need to feel included, to feel, you know, like I have such FOMO. But it's like actually I've realized that like I can deal with less. And like and have less time with people when I know that they genuinely love and care for me, and I don't have to fight for their time. I don't have to fight for their attention. That they just care for me regardless of if I'm there or not. And that their love is not gonna fade because I'm not by them all the time.
And like, it's so funny how this is all circling around, and like, how does that come to be? Vulnerable conversation. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like, if you really trust someone... My dog is barking. I'm not sure why. But in case anyone hears a little doggy, that's my little dachshund, Lily. But yeah, it's like... If you never communicate how you feel about someone, if you never communicate... If you don't have any basis of vulnerable communication with someone, then like that just breeds this feeling of mistrust, especially in someone that has relational difficulties. And so if you're not someone... like. And this has played out in so many times in my life as well, where there's been friendships where I've been obsessive, you know, and then a lot of time, the person on the other side of that obsessive relationship is like, whoa, actually I have to back all the way out. And like, what changed the obsessiveness in me was not the person backing out. I didn't take them backing out and say, oh, wow, maybe I'm being obsessive. That wasn't what happened. I knew that I was doing that and I didn't know how to stop. What really changed it was when people actually started to say, it's okay. And when they started to have boundaries. And that segues to our last little point of like, talking in eggshells also represents boundaries, because it's like, you have to walk around things sometimes. You can't talk about everything all the time, and that's healthy. And I remember, like, one of my closest friends, like, the first time that he said, no, I can't hang out with you, I was like, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Like, it was just, like, such a relief to be like, I know I can't be obsessive with this person because they'll tell me no. And they've communicated. That's the thing. They've communicated. It's not because I don't like you. It's not because I'm harboring bitterness. It's because I have a finite source of energy and I can't do this right now, or I have something else that takes priority.
And they know that they can't care for you and be there for you and like be 100% with you if there's not like a replenishment of their resources.
But like that communication's changed my life.
Yeah, no, literally. And I was just talking to somebody today about how, like, because quality time and just human interaction is so important to me in my relationships, if people withdraw, whether for good or bad reasons, whether for good or like conflict or non-conflict, if you don't tell me why, I'm going to perceive that as a distrust or a loyalty or no love or whatever. Like,
you're not going to know, because
not in every relationship, but in just some. And I'm just like, so just like for your future reference, like, if you're ever feeling like you need to process something and you don't want to talk about it, just let me know that you still love me. Yep. I know that it sounds like it's kind of needy. And for people who think that that sounds needy, it's not. It's understanding your needs. It's understanding that we've been hurt, that we've gone through something that has hurt us, that has changed the way that our brain is literally wired.
Yeah.
It's
the chemical imbalance
the synapses
in our
your brain
yes.
literally do not fire to the correct ones when you experience trauma.
Yes.
All right? And if that is a thing, you have to relearn those things. And you only do that by the exposure of people doing the right thing and showing you the right thing. And so it's this thing. It's like, hey, if we're going through conflict, that's okay. I just need you to tell me that you don't hate me and like that you'll get back to me soon.
And don't be fake with me either. You know, like, don't be like, oh, I love you so much, I love you so much. It's like, it's not like layered on. It's like, be honest and be like, honestly, I am feeling this way. But also, you know, because that's the thing. It's like I had people that were just that were just honest and just were like, yeah, I don't like this, and this about you. And I was like, oh, thank you so much. And then the relationships failed, you know, because it was like, okay, well, then that's that. And there's going to be relationships like that. You know, there's going to be people that are like that. But it's like, if you genuinely care about a person, that is just how it is. Yeah. You know, you communicate that. Yeah.
And it just creates sweet relationships. Yeah. And I think that's what ours is. And that's why I think, like, we're able to do this podcast is because, like, there's not a crossing of lines. There's not an unhealthy attachment to each other. There's not a dependency upon each other in an unhealthy way. Just a really sweet place that we're able to be vulnerable and authentic with each other and, like, really talk about the things that are important to us. Yes. And that's what this podcast is.
Yep. Boundaries are good, and talking is good, and I think that's it.
Nathan and Kayllen love each other.
Aw, they do. Yay.
Bubby.
So nice.
Wow. Look at us.
That's episode 2. So I guess that's it. Look at these natural, like, conclusions we find. Isn't it so fun?
It was really good.
And I don't even know how long it's been. It hasn't been that long, has it?
It's been an hour and 3 minutes.
But that's shorter than last time.
It is so... Yeah, it is. Yeah, guys. Our goal is to keep it under an hour and a half. We know that it'll be hard for us, but we'll just do part 2s and stuff like that.
But honestly, I'm proud of us.
That was really good. Yeah. And I knew our episode last week was a little longer because we talked about, like, what's the podcast going to be like? It's true, so I knew that was the case. Well, Nathan, is it time?
I think it's time to transition to
today's
ASMR.
Let me get one thing. I have a thing here that I didn't realize that I would have because this is all natural what's around us when we do this segment.
Yes.
And there just happen to be things around me that I have that I can make fun little noises with. Also, we can hear each other better now.
Yes.
And so we can talk like this.
It'll be better.
And we still hear each other.
Can you still hear me if I do this? Can you? Yeah. Okay, good.
I can.
Good. I can hear you too.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right. Nathan, I'm so glad that you were here having this podcast conversation with me.
Yes, I'm glad to be here.
And sometimes when I'm with you, it feels like I'm on the beach and there's little pebbles under my feet. Okay, we're at the beach and it's so relaxing.
description of our friendship. Kayllen, the Bible says something about living waters, and a man of understanding will draw out the depth or something.
Yeah.
Our relationship is like living waters.
Yes, and we don't want to burst your bubble.
No,
but
not your bubble.
We are going to have some hard conversations on this podcast.
Difficult.
Things that you may be uncomfortable with, but it's okay because we love and care about each other.
Yes, and we love and care about you, listener.
Exactly.
Listener.
So thank you so much for being here on this podcast episode number 2.
I think that's the end.
That's the end. That's perfect.
I think that's what happens is we go until we
end on
literally
laughing.
break.
Yes.
Oh, that's so funny.
Okay.